Hello and welcome to our channel. Today we're diving into a topic that completely reshaped the course of history, the American Revolution. Imagine a time when 13 small colonies, separated by an ocean from the most powerful empire of the time, took an extraordinary stand for freedom and independence. It was a time of courage, sacrifice, and revolutionary ideas that not only led to the founding of the United States, but also inspired countless movements across the globe. But what really caused this conflict? What drove ordinary colonists to rise up against the mighty British Empire? And how did a ragtag army of farmers, merchants, and artisans achieve the unthinkable, victory over a powerful and seasoned British military? And perhaps most importantly, what were the lasting impacts of this revolution, both within America and around the world? In today's video, we're going to uncover the story behind this transformative conflict. We'll take you through the causes, battles, and ideas that turned colonial outrage into a full-scale revolution. We'll also explore how the American Revolution planted the seeds of democracy, liberty, and the fight for self-governance in countries far beyond the United States. So whether you're a history buff or just curious about how the modern world was shaped, stick with us as we journey back to the late 18th century and witness a revolution that changed the world. To set the scene, let's travel back to the early 1700s. Britain had established 13 colonies along the eastern seaboard of North America, from New Hampshire in the north to Georgia in the south. For decades, the colonies operated semi-independently, developing their own ways of life, customs, and governments. Life in the colonies was largely agricultural, and local economies depended on farming, trade, and small-scale manufacturing. While they were British subjects, many colonists already felt a unique identity forming. They saw themselves as part of Britain, but also as part of something distinctly American. But things began to shift when Britain and France engaged in a fierce and costly struggle known as the 7 Years' War, or as it was called in the colonies, the French and Indian War. This conflict, fought between 1756 and 1763, ended with a British victory and control over a vast new territory in North America. However, the war came with a hefty price tag, plunging Britain into massive debt. To cover these costs, the British government turned its attention to the American colonies, imposing new taxes and regulations. The colonies, however, were not pleased. They had contributed men and resources to the war effort and felt they should be rewarded, not burdened. They argued that since they had no representation in the British Parliament, they should not be taxed by it. This sentiment gave rise to one of the Revolution's most famous phrases: "No taxation without representation." The colonists felt that these taxes violated their rights as Englishmen, who believed they had a voice in how they were governed. The first of these taxes was the Sugar Act of 1764, which placed a tax on imported goods such as sugar, molasses, and other commodities. But it was the Stamp Act of 1765 that really ignited anger across the colonies. This act required all printed materials, like newspapers, legal documents, and even playing cards, to carry a tax stamp. This tax affected nearly everyone, from wealthy merchants to small farmers, and was seen as a direct assault on colonial freedom. Outrage spread like wildfire. Colonists organized protests, petitions, and boycotts. In October 1765, representatives from 9 of the colonies gathered in New York for the Stamp Act Congress, where they issued a declaration of rights and grievances, rejecting Britain's authority to tax them without representation. Eventually, the widespread protests forced Britain to repeal the Stamp Act in 1766. However, Britain maintained its right to tax the colonies, and tensions only continued to build. In 1770, a tragic event known as the Boston Massacre further fueled resentment. British soldiers stationed in Boston fired into a crowd of colonists who were harassing them, killing 5 men. The incident was widely publicized in the colonies, and it helped to turn public opinion against British rule. Colonial leaders like Samuel Adams and Paul Revere seized on the event, using it as propaganda to rally the colonies against what they saw as oppressive British forces. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new daily videos. Then came the Tea Act of 1773. This act was intended to help the struggling British East India Company by allowing it to sell tea directly to the colonies at a reduced rate. But the colonists saw this as yet another attempt by Britain to impose its will on them. In response, a group of colonists disguised as Native Americans boarded British ships in Boston Harbor and dumped over 300 chests of tea into the water. This event, known as the Boston Tea Party, was a powerful act of defiance and a turning point in colonial resistance. In response, Britain cracked down with the coercive acts, or as the colonists called them, the Intolerable Acts. These laws restricted colonial self-governance, closed Boston Harbor, and allowed British troops to be quartered in colonists' homes. The goal was to isolate Massachusetts and crush resistance. Instead, it unified the colonies further. Representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies convened in Philadelphia in 1774 at the First Continental Congress, where they discussed a unified response to British oppression. They petitioned the king to repeal the Intolerable Acts, but he refused. The stage was now set for armed conflict. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched to Concord, Massachusetts, intending to seize a stockpile of colonial arms. But local militia, known as Minutemen, intercepted them. Shots were fired, and the battles of Lexington and Concord marked the beginning of open warfare. These early skirmishes showed that the colonists were willing to take up arms to defend their rights. As fighting spread, the Second Continental Congress convened in May 1775, and soon they appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Washington faced a daunting task. He led an army with limited resources and training against one of the most powerful military forces in the world. But the colonists had a powerful advantage: their resolve and the belief in their right to self-governance. Despite initial losses, the Continental Army and local militias continued to resist. The turning point came in October 1777, when the Americans won a decisive victory at the Battle of Saratoga. This victory convinced France, Britain's longtime rival, to enter the war as an ally of the United States. With French military and financial support, the tide began to turn in favor of the American cause. By 1781, the war was nearing its end. The final major battle occurred at Yorktown, Virginia, where British General Lord Cornwallis surrendered to Washington's forces. The British government could no longer justify the immense cost of the war, and in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Britain recognized the independence of the United States, and a new nation was born. But the impact of the American Revolution didn't stop at America's shores. The revolution sent shockwaves across the world, inspiring movements for independence and democracy in Europe, Latin America, and beyond. Revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and self-governance challenged monarchies and colonial powers, creating a ripple effect that would influence history for centuries. The American Revolution was more than just a war. It was a radical shift in ideas about government and human rights. It proved that ordinary people could rise up and demand freedom, that self-governance was possible, and that a government's power must come from the people. These ideas would go on to inspire other revolutions, such as the French Revolution, and would help shape democratic principles worldwide. So there you have it, the story of the American Revolution, a transformative conflict that gave birth to a nation and changed the course of history. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting history content. Drop a comment below and let us know what aspect of the revolution fascinates you the most. Until next time, stay curious.